VOD review number 2. We can get out of the light that triggers the people for game number 2. And it's our first LCK VOD review in a while. It's going to be Sandbox Gaming versus Kingzone. And these are teams we don't end up reviewing very often. Because inevitably, the big game in Korea, since I started VOD reviewing towards the second half of spring season, involved Griffin or SKT. That's just the way it went. But I'm of the opinion that right now, the best team in Korea is in fact Sandbox. I believe Sandbox right now is super duper strong. But I'm going to have to change seat. I'm going to have to at least move over here to LCK Summer 2019 because we can't show you pick order at the moment. So let me show you this. So I'm going through the Gamepedia website in order to get picks and bans. There's a quirk of the VODs, and for some reason, pick ban can't be included for LCK games. So we're going to have to do the pick ban this way. So this is the finalized pick ban. Strong comps, as you can see. But I think it's more informational when you can see this. So we're only doing game 1 for the review today, guys. We'll talk about game 2 and look at the game 2 pick and ban, actually, afterwards, because it was very relevant and very interesting. But here's the pick ban via Gamepedia. So Sandbox bans on blue side. Lux Aurelia Yuumi. Double support ban is becoming the new meta right now, with some of the strong supports you can consider. The Sona ban from Kingzone in game number 1. It was an intriguing one in that we've had no Sona Taric priority in Korea. It's only been played once, but enough to draw a Sona ban in this game. Sylas ban, so of the Flex champions, only Sylas and Aurelia banned. Zoe final ban. And Aatrox is conspicuously left open. Aatrox first pick tier. Now in Korea, Aatrox win rate has been very low, at least on the first few days of summer. The champion, very, very strong team fighter, but teams have been trying to play her just in solo lane and not trade him, I should say, in solo lane and not give him any resources and being turret dived and died to things like Fiora in lane. The Rise Sejuani answer also gets them access to Sejuani, and that's my opinion as to why Aatrox has been left open, because at the end of the day, Sejuani feels like the champion that opens up a lot of drafting options. We talked about it in our first VOD review of the night, but in Korea, drafting against Sejuani first round is proving to be very difficult because it means those melee solo laners like Camille, for example, rise up in priority and then some. So Rise Sejuani first round, powerful stuff. The Rise in Korea is obviously super high ticket item, gives them magic damage. Sejuani we've already talked about. And Sandbox just go Varus Kench, which I think is becoming more and more the norm. You either take Xayah Rakan or the Varus Tahm Kench on blue side in the first round, because you see the Sejuani, you can't pick any more solo laners because you need more information about what lanes the Sejuani is going to work with. You want to ban away something like Camille if you don't see a solo lane pick up here. And you're just hoping and banking that the final pick will be something you can actually find a way to take advantage of. So Kingzone have shown to be absolutely the best team in Korea so far in summer season. From there, the Camille's locked in, and we know that Camille Sejuani is a very strong duo lane. There was also some questions here because Sejuani's solo lane has been played. Cuz is a big Camille jungle, but the reason why nameplates are important in this game is that Kingzone actually have really strong top lane Camille player and a really strong Camille jungle player in this particular scenario. So the fact that Rascal is a really good Camille top player means they have a lot of options and flexibility in the pick bans, and we already know that Rise and Camille are very flexible laners that don't get locked into the final pick. So second round bans, Xayah Rakan banned out by Sandbox. Understandable, they're looking for a duo lane. The Braum ban makes you wonder what they're going to be doing in terms of their lineup. Braum strong against Varus poke. If you're going to go Comet Varus like we saw from Cloud9 in our first series, definitely Braum's a solid ban. The Kingzone bans, jungle power level respect in the Olaf. It also is a preview to tell you they might not be going for the strongest duo lane because Olaf with strong lanes is always the equation, so makes a lot of sense if you want to be running a Sivir lane to ban away the Olaf. And the Akali ban is because Sandbox are actually really good at this pick. It's not quite Frog and Anivia levels of respect, but these days, Akali's in Korea is seen as a counterpick to Yasuo and a counterpick in very severe scenarios, or it's because the team has mastery. And both Sandbox's solo laners are awesome Akali players. Dove is pretty close to a Akali one trick in terms of his champion pool. He's good Aatrox as well, and Ryze. Those are kind of his three. And Summer plays everything, but is an awesome Akali player as well. So I respect the Akali ban here. Sivir's taken on power level, understandable. Essence Reaver and champion buffs means that Sivir in this spot is clear, and Deft's fallback, one of his most reliable picks, is for sure the Sivir. And then Sandbox need a solo laner, and they end up taking two solo laners. So they flex Aatrox to jungle, which I think is a cool thing. We've been calling for it earlier in the summer season. It was played plenty in the off season. It takes away the bad laning phase the Aatrox has because you don't have to sit there and be turret dive. And they go Syndra Jace. They know the solo laners are Ryze and Camille. Syndra against Ryze or Camille has a lot of kill threat. It's an old pick into Ryze. Not a counter pick, but a strong lane for the Syndra. And if you do foresee Rascal jumping on the Camille, which again is pretty likely, given just the history of the players with those champions rather than the roles they're into, they just end up going Jace. So the reason why I highlighted this game is that Syndra has priority on Ryze. Jace has priority on Camille. Makes a lot of sense, right? So how is it that we end up with this as the final draft? Because Taric is last picked here to give them a losing bot lane as well. And that's why this is an interesting game, is that on paper, if you look at all of the champions, outside of, say, Tahm Kench versus Taric, which is much less informational than Varus Tahm versus Sivir Taric, it's actually complete priority to the side of Sandbox. Like, this is early priority in all lanes to Sandbox. Jace to get turret plates, Syndra potentially to get turret plates, Aatrox to get a free jungling phase. Everything here is really big for Sandbox. So while I would have preferred to just ignore pick ban because we don't have pick ban included in the VOD, I included this pick ban order here because the order is important to understand, wait, they last picked Taric. So they're last picking a champion who loses 2v2. That's late game insurance in most games. And it puts them further in the hole that the rest of their draft deals with. How could they potentially win this game? How could they win this game pre-40 minutes? How can LCK actually get a win here? And that's, I think, a lot of really good questions that we're going to shed light on, because it's my strong opinion that by far the best team in the LCK, based on week one, is Kingzone DragonX. And I feel like this is a great game to illustrate it, because they didn't necessarily make it easy based on the draft. And I think Sandbox have also shown they're able to attack teams aggressively in the early games. So I don't think this is by any means Kingzone scaling against a bad opponent and winning. This is a pretty more nuanced game for Kingzone. I think is a pretty cool one to track. So I know a lot of people might not have watched this game before, or have kind of slept on both Kingzone and Sandbox and had Griffin and SKT stars in their eyes, but there's something about Kingzone. There's a reason I'm so hyped about them, and I hope I do a good justice to explain that in this game. So game number one, Kingzone versus Sandbox. A lot of early priority for Sandbox, so they can kind of just do whatever they want in the early game. They know they're not going to have any deep vision placed against them. The Kingzone team's too weak at level 1 in order to invade unless they're going for a 5-man invade. Tucson does the Tucson thing. In case you're not aware of his reputation, he's known as a good support, known as a great engaged support. He's also known for, when in doubt, Unsealed Spellbook. And he has gone Unsealed Spellbook Taric, so he doesn't even have a defensive summoner to go along with all the scaling on the side of the bot lane. It was, after all, the Camille top lane. And again, we were talking about solo picks and how, okay, Tahm Kench versus Taric, not much of an advantage there. It's kind of relevant in our top lane calculation, because Camille versus Jace, you hook shot in, you do a nice little bit of damage, you can't get out, and Jace auto EQ maybe he goes to hammer form and slams you, and it's not great. But Camille Sejuani synergy, insanely big. It's why we saw both in the LEC, LCK, and possibly the LPL, Camille mid lane because Camille just engages around mid lane, Sejuani jungles around mid lane, and the first stun hits, you instantly proc that Sejuani passive that stacks with melee autos. You get that second bit, press the attack is fully loaded in, you get kills. That's why this duo has been very prevalent as a mid lane duo. It can be played as a top lane duo as well. And you're against Jace, a champion who overextends in lane very natively. It could have been Aatrox as well, as we know. Whether it was Aatrox top or Jace top, Cuz wants to camp top lane. He doesn't really have much going for him in his side lanes because they're a lot more conditional against the sandbox champions. The Kingzone top lane, there's many lane states where Sejuani dives in and gets a kill. So I think that Sandbox should be aware that if this scaling draft is going to fight anywhere and not just try to farm for their items, it's going to be top lane around Rascal, and Rascal is a strong Camille player, as we've said a couple of times. So Raptor Ward on the Sejuani. We get to pause now when it comes to the runes here and see if there's anything interesting. We talked about the spellbook. Bloodlines is kind of a greedy choice from Deft. When I look at most pro runes, Bloodlines is considered too slow an item in order to take it in pro play. It's almost always Alacrity, just because you need those 20 minion kills or a kill or assist in order to get a proc of the Bloodline. It fits again into their scaling. You don't fit natural lifesteal into a Sivir build, so maybe you just have to take that because you're going Essence Reaver. The time in which you pick up lifesteal is even later than an Infinity Edge carry, and definitely later than something like a tier carry or a Blade of the Ruin King carry, most obviously. So Bloodline taken there. Cut down on the side of Ghost, knowing he's going to have to auto attack onto Taric and Sejuani quite a bit. I guess that makes sense. No cut down onto the Sivir, which I think is fine given the game. Ryze has gone Aftershock, which should tell you that the jungler's not coming mid. Like, I think Aftershock to me is the quintessential Ryze rune you pick when you're not getting jungle camp. I think that's the time you take it because it gives you the chance to survive early. And it's not like Ryze builds resists in order to get value out of the changed Aftershock that doesn't have the damage scaling anymore from AP. So I think it tells you it's going to be weak side, just grin and bear it from Neon. On the side of Sandbox, Conqueror from the jungle from the Aatrox I think is fine. I think everything else is pretty standard on that side, so we can roll into the game. A lot of options here for Sandbox. They should be able to exert their will really hard against Kingzone in the early game. Aatrox full bot side clear. Sejuani just trying to get as many camps as possible. Started bot side because of the Raptor ward, which means you can't go for the fast 3-camp gank as Sejuani. Funnily enough, the ward pattern we saw of ward on Raptors stopped Sejuani from having any early gank presence. Because usually you would consider Sejuani wants to play topside around the Camille, take 3 camps, and then level 3 gank from a weird angle. The ward onto Raptors and the invades from Sandbox are what stopped that. So that was some very good level 1 warding from Sandbox. Cuz is actually, this is very interesting here. So we know that Kingzone can only gank top based on our expectation of their champions. Slow push from Sandbox, as you can see. And then it looks like it's going to be a group minion wave and potential turret dive from Sandbox, right? Like that's the kind of look that they're going for with a play like this. Instead, Aatrox walks in, sees Raptors up, pings onto red buff saying I'm going to kill her there. Doesn't see him there, but then goes back to do Raptors. I think this is a really weird decision. This is a very technical call, but you warded the Raptors early to stop Kingzone from doing 3-camp clear topside, then gank the Jace. You see Raptors are still up and that red buff is down. Was it really Raptors, red, and then go down bot side clear? Like, it could be. Absolutely. It's not impossible, but it's Camille Sejuani topside. You're giving up so much not having Sejuani show up topside around 3 to 4 minutes. Why go to Raptors? Like, killing Raptors here and not walking topside, I think, is a really strange decision, given all the information and good other moves Unfleek has made. Because this duo is just obnoxious. Watch this stuff. Slow it down. Cuz is shown on a ward now, and Summer starts to walk away. Summer's actually slow to notice him on this lane ward. But the thing is, the moment you get hit by anything, this time it was the Q start into walking up. Like, you're always going to get the entire permafrost and get the kill. And that's why I find it so weird that Aatrox did Raptors. What are the chances that Cuz is not topside there? I would say it's at least 85-15 that Cuz was going to gank topside. And he did the Raptors there, which is very, very strange decision coming through. So that's a mistake from Onfleek, who's usually really good at his pathing and the early game there. And it's Kingzone ganking around the one lane where they can gank. So that part you like from them. So them picking up an early kill here, I think, is pretty big. Joker actually used Cleanse in order to chase for the kill here. This feels like a bit of desperation because Aatrox already pinged on the way. Yeah, they're trying to get the kill. They draw the heal out, so it's a trade of summoners. And I think Cleanse is pretty... Like, you're not going to be punished in this lane pre-6 almost ever. So I think it's fine to use Cleanse there. Yeah, points in the chat about where Summit is. The Jace has to play this lane aggressively. The whole point of the laning phase and choosing the Jace is to push up. So I think it's more on the jungler backing up the laner's playstyle and shutting down the one area on the map you could gank, rather than Summit shouldn't have been that far pushed up. Like, you could argue he for sure should have reacted a little bit earlier. I think he's dead either way. But Summit dying and flashing in that particular gank setup really subverts the top lane matchup, which should be very Jace favored, and means that either you don't get as much of an advantage as you would have when you had flash up, or the enemy doesn't have to counter gank this lane because, you know, you're getting a bit more breathing room as Rascal. I think either way, pushing up there is what needed to happen, and I think that that's actually more on Sandbox not backing that up than anything else. One wave advantage in mid. I mean, most of a wave, I guess. Yeah, one wave advantage in mid. Half a minion wave in bot lane. So there's still advantages because it is a very strong draft from Sandbox in terms of early priority. But Aatrox so far, because he was off the pace with the first gank, having priority might end up being that thing where you have something on paper that could get you big advantages, but in practice, the priority doesn't mean much. Like, for now, looking at this minimap, Jace's flash is down and has died. There's incremental natural leads in mid and bot lane, but Aatrox is only 2 camps up against a jungle that doesn't need to farm much. And it's another big reason for why Sejuani is in the meta is you build a Cinderhulk, you build a Warmogs, and every other item is Gucci on top. Like, it's a very cheap build. So Sejuani's opportunity cost from not farming is way less than it was in previous metas where you had to be kind of farming and ganking at maximum efficiency. You can take inefficient ganks when you have things like the guarantee of getting a kill around the Camille lane, and when you don't need to build as many items. So I think that makes it pretty trivial for Sejuani to be in a very strong part in this meta. Like, you at least need to be taking an early Infernal Drake as on fleek. Pops over the wall. Cool control ward spot. We're seeing this spot more and more. The ward placed in and around here. If you're the team that has lesser priority on the side of the map, let's say you're in the bot lane and you have a losing 2v2 bot lane and a losing mid lane, so the bot side of the map, your priority is low, you sneak a control ward into the pit outside of conventional vision where someone has to actually enter the pit to this point, if you're walking the normal way, or pop over the back to see this ward. Reason being, This ward is, don't allow the enemy to solo it at 5 to 9 minutes. I.e., I'm not going to be playing bot side because it's a weak side, and I don't want the enemy to solo down the Drake without us knowing. You pop it in here, and because of the quirks of vision behind a wall, you will always know if and when Baron's being soloed down. So good vision spot there, put down from Kingzone. When Elmfleet pops in, he's like, well, I wanted to solo down the Infernal, and I can't. Has to at least do a little bit more prep work in order to make that happen. Unlike our first review, it is on-hit Varus in this game. You can't go lethality Varus against Taric Sejuani because unfortunately you just never kill the front line then because you don't do enough damage to health and armor stacking. This is a disaster 8 minutes for Sandbox. Their jungler has a 2-camp lead, but they're 1 kill down, and they haven't taken a Drake or a turret plate, which feels awful in a comp like this. It was supposed to be Jace doing it trivially. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. The other lanes are farming out. For sure, you're really tilted here, Sandbox, because you've got no leads with your priority yet. Farm. It's on Sandbox to do things which we're not seeing from them at the moment. Like they're not actually making the Drake play that they have been behooved to. They're clearing vision around it to try to make that happen. It gets easier for Sandbox post 10 minutes because then Rift Herald spawns and it's impossible for Kingzone to protect both sides of the map. They see the Camille coming top side. So definitely a quiet early game in the first 10. And then you see Cuz invading and you're like, wait, what's happening here? Like Sandbox is so tilted to see Cuz even daring to attempt an invade. Good map play. So Cuz solo invades to work out what's happening top side. And this is not to coordinate a play bot side. But you know, he knows there's 3 members defending this. So they know there's no potential for a jungler coming bot line. And actually Kingzone just make an all-in attempt that Sandbox don't see coming. I love Neon's roam as well. So the information is Cuz says 3 of them are here. Camille's not going to come join. So this is just a Cuz solo invade and he feels like he can get out. And Neon pushes in the wave on this blue buff back timing and runs bot lane. Now he's spotted in a ward if you're looking, but no one's looking. There's no ping onto it. And it means that Neon's in position in order to make a pick here. This is really expertly done by Kingzone. They don't get a double kill by absolutely the slimmest of margins, but they're always on the front foot. And this doesn't look like much, right? But so many LCK teams in this point, the Camille walks down with the Sejuani to get nothing, because they were never really going to steal a blue, and the Ryze pushed in a minion wave and gets half of a turret plate, and then it's over. I love that Kingzone is looking for more. They say, wait, we can never be counter-gank bot side. Syndra and Aatrox are around this blue, and they all in bot side with the Sivir, with the Taric ult, and with the Neon roam. Like, the coordination here is something that we haven't seen happen pre-20 minutes in Korean games this season. So it's standard, but it's standard proactive macro. And as you know, my region has a love-hate relationship with early proactive macro. So even then, it's just a small thing, but that's a nice punish. And you might say, but Papa, they've got the scaling comp. Does it really matter? Did this game change based on moves like that? And I would say definitely yes. Now, is that because I just need to justify my point? Let me explain to you. What happened through this is that Sivir Taric, with their ults and Sivir's flash, forced double summoner out of Varus Tahm Kench. They should be walking up and taking down turret plates with priority in the 2v2. That means the Varus Tahm Kench can no longer have the lane control they're looking for usually, and thus pushing up and taking down an Infernal Drake solo is a lot harder to do in many scenarios. Already, the natural state of bot side of the map is warped by the good roam timing by the good all-in attempt from Kingzone. They find the kill, doesn't need explanation, getting a kill there is big. But as a draft with 3 losing priority lanes, they get the better map movements, and the only 2 times they've gone aggressive instead of respectful, they've found kills in the early game that was stacked in the advantage sandbox. I think if you add all that together, Kingzone is, in this case, the David to the Goliath of Sandbox in terms of the comp identities. There's not a lot of weak spots for Sandbox in the early game. You need to be so on point with where you pinpoint your aggression. Otherwise, how many times has a team chosen a scaling draft, tried to fight too early and lost, and we're the first people to say, guys, you had the scaling draft. Why did you even try that? You could have just farmed out. In this meta, in these days with turret plates, just farming out doesn't work. S is the scaling word. It is the dirty word that we put that :D or D: in the chat and get worried about. So finding ways to scale is finding ways to hit back when you have extra information to actually get gold into the game, to actually allow yourselves to scale. That's the takeaway you guys need to know, is that without moves like this, you just give too long a leash for Sandbox to just do their thing and play their game plan. And finding these roams are the reason that Kingzone is actually staying very competitive in terms of the gold. Sandbox on the back timing, good to see from OnFlick. And this is where Sandbox actually start to get back into the game, is that they start putting information to good use. Yes, an all-in was lost on the bot side, but it's a full recall from Deft and Tucson. So they do actually get the Infernal Drake here. Summit desperately wants lane wards, but he doesn't have his jungler backing him up, because his jungler is making a bot side play, so he has to give up the minion wave. In case you're wondering why this play happens, because we know the identity of this matchup. Sejuani isn't seen at any point, so why does Summit play around Sejuani? He's playing to his wards. The way this lane works is you win unless the jungler is there. Your team got an advantage bot side, so the enemy team knows your jungler isn't there for a counter gank, and you only had one single trinket ward. You don't have a control ward to spot the river, so you can't trinket ward the lane. So Summit has to play around the likelihood of Sejuani being there for a lane gank. That's why this happens. It's the top laner sense we always praise laners like Smeb for. Summit leaves the lane because he can't respect top lane gank, and he will die to a lane gank. So he walks all the way around trying to get info, returns to the wave, and how long is the safe time you can play around lane? He's still trying to play around left side of the map, but this happens. If you want to know a top laner is good, watch this play. Top lane VOD review. Hard to emulate in solo queue, but something to take some inspiration from. The lane state is not you under the enemy tower for the first time. Global notification says Aatrox is bot side. So you know the enemy knows that you're not there for a counter gank. The enemy also knows you don't have any control ward vision down and where your one trinket ward is. You can't play around Sejuani being there for a lane gank, and you know that this is the time for a lane gank. This is the time to make a play top side. Do not run into the lane, even though it's at an even state, you will die. Summit knows this as well, so what does he use his time for? He puts down the assist ping. He has Aatrox come and clear wards top side. He plays the lane. Look, notice he is never on the left side of the lane, which is within, say, hookshot range of a Camille. He's out of hookshot range the entire time he walks up for as long as possible. And the only time he errs, watch when he changes, is when Aatrox has already started walking up. So he's playing towards his jungler's positioning, and his jungler has clearly been communicated that he's almost certain Sejuani is top side. There's no... If you look at this play, Summit leaves no room for him to die to a Sejuani lane gank. There's no way he can die to that. But he also gets access to the minions. He doesn't get zoned the entire time. That is an exact reel of what top laner sense is. That is, with all the information I have, these are the percentages I'm playing around that I'm going to die imminently, and this is going to how I play around it. Like, that's a plan coming together, and they even win the health trade out of it. It's very hard to talk about when we're talking about it in one-time speed without the ability to pause a lot, but it's a very deep thing not dying as a top laner. Whether you're a top laner or you get autofilled to top lane, it's really easy to die in top lane. But if you actually have your team working around you, or if you actually know the next levels you can play around, you put up scenarios like that where you give yourself the highest chance to get gold and to not die. And that's just what top lane is. It's about farming out your items and then teleporting out. So big shout out to Summit there, one of our best top laners for sure. A lot of pro top laners struggle in being able to read the map enough to know when they're likely to be ganked and when they're not. Sometimes there's very obvious markers like vision. Sometimes it's when a Drake is spawning, but the best top laners are always ahead of the game as to when they're likely to be ganked. So a couple of good moments for Sandbox here, not dying topside, keeping the summoner on the Jace to continue to push up. 3 turret plates down now, so that's much more the normal state of game. But those are the only turret plates that have gone down so far this game. Again, for a scaling draft, good news for Kingzone. Summit tries to make the exact same play and dies. So backs away. Let's watch the minimap and how much information was available. Taric and Ryze pinged out going towards the top side. They would have been looking at the minimap for a Realm Warp because you can see Realm Warp through terrain. They know what no Realm Warp is used, and Ryze goes back mid lane. So who can be here is the question that someone has to go through. Does he have a ward? I don't believe he has a ward up in this case. So he's trying to anticipate being turret dived, and this time dies. But notice how much it requires. It does require Rascal to flash. I know Atlas had a first point of was the flash worth it or not. The flash is definitely correct because Summit has his flash up and still dies on that face check. Kind of the same spot that we saw Faker die in a similar spot in one of those big games against Griffin last season. That time you die. So even if you're still playing with the Galaxy Brain, you die. And that's, you know, kind of the acceptable loss of trying to play on the top side. Kingzone get Rift Herald around the top side, which is awkward. It feels like Sandbox should have had first inroads on every neutral. But every time Aatrox has kind of backed off the map, when the vision has been there for Kingzone, they're making a lot happen. The flash gets them Rift Herald here because it guarantees the first kill. It keeps up some tools, and it means that Rift Herald can be taken top side. So Kingzone get a lot out of this anyway. Yeah, and as DCF DTL saying, like, for sure you die there as Summit, but you feel better face checking as Summit because your flash is up. So it's just one of those things where you play a lane state or even just a leave lane state differently with flash up or down. Gold overall, pretty even, so advantage Kingzone. We don't always get to the point where the Kingzone's draft works. You still need map control and to be able to engage with Taric to get really any value out of Taric. Taric mid-game onwards is super, super strong as a support because his ultimate allows you to basically land any proactive play if you have enough engage, but from behind, obviously, it provides very little. Turret trade without priority is, again, Kingzone's good work topside, and Kingzone still playing high tempo enough with a scaling draft, so it is important to note that Kingzone going 1-for-1 at any point is a small advantage Kingzone because of where the game's going. Yeah, just too hard engage attempt there with a lot left open on Sandbox. They only have to use Cleanse to make that happen. But the advantage for Kingzone is there's a bot side objective to take. Even though they only get 2 turrets for 1 on the top side, which initially is big for Sandbox. It's more global gold. It's difficult to return to deep top lane vision in the very early parts of the game. Like the vision advantage they get of pushing an inner turret topside, that advantage is very hard to return to a little bit later in the game when you feel strong enough to contest both the Raptors, then the enemy red buff, then put vision in more aggressively. Before that point, Tiamat Camille is going to actually farm quite a bit, and Jace is going to have to group or go bot lane to be able to have a natural playstyle. So Camille's now kind of in an ultra safe spot, and all the Syndra can do is wait for minions to be pushed towards her. Sandbox pushing bot lane, and in a long lane, Jace actually does better than he does. Jace does better against Ryze in a long lane than he does in mid lane. In mid lane, it's much harder for him to actually really punish, but in the long lane, and with how speedy he is, you're able to disengage quite a lot. Chases away on the bot side because they see Kingzone walking up again. Good lane positioning from both. And you'll notice, like we predicted, Neon's playing weak side wherever possible. Sejuani wants to spend all her time next to Camille because together they have this stun synergy and the melee burst synergy. Oh, really good scout of the week there, actually, from Dove. Dove plays this awesome at the start. Holy crap, I didn't even notice this on the first time I watched. Watch Dove here. So Dove is like, I might be dived. Look at how he plays this. So he sidesteps the ult. Through Chilling Smite, Scout of the Week is awesome onto Rascal, who almost straight up dies. Stasis upon the other two people that come up, and then flashes to safety. Dove ultra played that well. And yes, some people are saying Sejuani's boosted and doing the Smithy jokes, but Dove plays that really good. Let's not underrate how good his play is there. Now Sandbox walk up, and we already talked about how Kingzone have to engage as their scaling comp. They can't just get pushed down. Let's watch this play. So this is what happens when you have to hard engage. Cuz comes back in at low health because Kingzone say, let's fight now and not allow them to siege. And this is, again, something that not many Korean teams make this call. We are 19 minutes into the game. The scaling comp doesn't have all their items core. The Sejuani ult is down. The Sivir ult is down. But Kingzone say, we should fight now. And you look at kind of what cooldowns and what things are down to justify this. Dove will find it very hard to walk up in a scenario like this with no summoners on Syndra. So that works against him. A lot of other flashes are up. Tahm Kench flashes down, so they can't overextend as hard for turret damage. And Kingzone decide, okay, let's punish. They just want to make this play happen with no Sejuani ultimate, because Taric ult in a scenario like this is very powerful. They can always force a fight with Camille ult and Taric ult, allowing Camille to freely engage with full damage build. It goes super even, but if Kingzone believe their like fortunes are even or better, it's the right move because Sandbox found the timing when their sideways are in a decent spot to put their strong siege comp mid lane and couldn't get a turret out of it. Like, keeping their turret up here is really, really big. You went for Dove and getting dived instead of Dove getting dove. It's because there's a lot of, you know, when you're a caster, it's very easy to go for the word that first comes to your mind. So when Jarvan gets a big engage, you think sometimes cataclysmic engage. Dove is a hard thing to say. Also, the Koreans say dabu, which is actually really funny. So they say dubu or dabu, I forget which one, because Dove Soap, which is a very famous soap band in Korea, is the Hangul for it, the Korean language for it is dabu. So because Dove is written the same way internationally, but then is dubu in Korea, they actually end up calling the player Dove dubu as well, which is kind of a fun quirk of language. So just because there's so many language quirks around Dove, I don't want to say Dove quite a lot. So how does this play start here? So Cuz and Rascal just hard engage onto Dove on the top side because Neon's walking out. So the start of this play is Neon realm warps to get the catch. Where's the vision here to make this play happen? So Syndra's in lane on the minimap we're watching right now. Backs away. And it's actually just a blind read from the Rise to say, let's find a way to get the collapse. So after the invade comes from Rascal and Cuz, Rise sees them and tries to come in for the pincer, which is pretty cool play, all things considered. Syndra has no summoners. This is a really good read by Neon to back up the Rascal Cuz invade. And Syndra just can't do anything, right? She doesn't have the ability to choose targets and just goes down. Then on the bot side here, OnFleet gets a couple of kills, and they don't have an exit strategy. So the first plan here is good, but unfortunately the moment that a kill comes in for Aatrox, there's no way for them to win this fight. Sandbox can just brute force it. So that's the duality of the Aatrox. And even though we give so much respect to Kingzone scaling teamfight comp, the reason why the scaling teamfight comp comes together is Taric ulti. Taric ulti's value in this game is actually massive. We go through the fight here. Tusin's a monster. It's the only reason Sivir doesn't die is that Tusin hits a two-man stun. But they're going to lose the Baron here. And as we go over the fight, we should talk about why the Taric was last picked in this game. Yeah, the Baron goes down for Sandbox. So even though I like the initial play by Kingzone, the fact that they couldn't back up the rest of their members and actually get there with their ult up ends up kind of against them. So Sandbox pick up the Baron here overall. So Taric value in this game is actually, like, why is Taric picked is the question you might ask to cement a third losing lane. It's because Taric as a champion is an answer to Aatrox, the new Aatrox. The new Aatrox only works if he can get that first kill. So you actually just pop the Taric ultimate the moment that Aatrox commits his ult and actually starts using spells aggressively. And then Aatrox will never be able to get an ult reset because the 2.5 second duration, just given how timings worked, and especially if you hit a Dazzle or any other CC, you can wait out Aatrox ultimate and sustain through it with the Taric ultimate. That's why Taric is last picked into another losing lane for Kingzone. But Taric isn't grouped, doesn't have Cosmic Radiance up, and Sandbox actually get the bonanza. They get a teamfight win. They get the ability to take the Baron just after 20 minutes. Like, Taric's not been involved much in this game at all, which is fine. Taric is a late game scaling support. But then when the actual potentially game losing moment happens, Taric also isn't involved. So for all his scaling, they lost first Baron in this game, and only keeping like inhibitors up is enough usually to stop that. And there's so many teams in Korea with this draft, in fact, all 8 other teams than these two, where if they lose the first Baron and they're being pushed in 2 lanes like this, I think they lose at least 1 inhibitor, probably 2 inhibitors. Like, this is normally the death knell for a scaling comp in Korea, because you're pushed in 2 lanes, you're farmed out on, there's nothing you can do, right? You're powerless to do anything. But watch how Kingzone play this. This is a really, really cool play. So they're pushing in, and you can see Ghost and Dove. The 2 highest Siege champions are alone. And meanwhile, another 2 members... Oh, sorry. There's actually 3 of them grouped in the top side. And then Summer and OnFleet move over to push the minion wave down bot lane. That's the play here. So it's Tahm Kench, Syndra, and Varus in the mid lane. And then Jason, Aatrox looking to bring over this minion wave. They don't have a minion wave yet to Sandbox. They're waiting for the next minion wave in the mid lane. So Joker and Varus start to move topside, not spotted by a ward. Dove is shown moving from left to right. And Kingzone, let's see when they make the exact decisive call, what information they have. They make the call now. This is the time they call, hey, let's all in onto Sandbox in the bot side. OnFleek's flashes down, Summit's flashes up, but we have Sivir and we can chase them. And this is against Baron. In Korea, almost no team makes proactive, decisive plays like this, because if you mess it up and die, you lose the game. But seeing Dove move left to right in the mid lane tells them they know that they also would know in almost every scenario if Joker and Ghost were coming to bot lane to join. So they know that Dove's not going to be there, And they all in pull the trigger onto the two members here, knowing that they have Camille with flash up, they have Sivir ult, they have Taric ult, and that they will get at least one kill from this play and reset what should be a Doom Baron push. Kingzone have Sivir, but she doesn't have 3 items or anything like that. There's no guarantee they don't lose an inhibitor. And again, in Korea, you almost always lose the inhibitors here. And they use all their flashes proactively to turn around this Baron push. With still a minute on Baron, Sandbox lose 4 members. And in hindsight, you can rewind it and say, okay, that's just the right play. This is what Korean teams don't do, is look for the counterpunch rather than just look to lose the minimum. Kingzone are not looking to lose the minimum in this play. They're looking to fight back at a moment when Sandbox has caught them with their pants down around Baron. They're looking to find something in the game and fight for something, and it's something that Korean teams don't do. Korean teams wait for the 85% play. This is not an 85% play from Kingzone because it's flash up on Jace. They can put down acceleration gate. What if Joker and Ghost took a slightly longer path around? Can you kill them fast enough before Joker uses his Abyssal Voyage? All these things are relevant, but Kingzone evaluates them and understands that this is a play where they could absolutely turn around the game and not be split to death. And that's why it's super cool to see. They make the play here. They know how long their engage range is. They know the fact that it's Camille Taric, so you're guaranteed at least a first kill. Like, this is really heartening to see from a Korean team because we haven't seen this from enough Korean teams so far. And they do get the payoffs. This is just desserts for the current meta that's a lot about what do you have and what can it do rather than when best should I wait for our comp to spike the hardest. This was 2-item Sivir. This was Taric ult used to negate the fact that some people can turn on Rascal and just kill him on this Camille, because Camille will always be pretty far up the front. Clear shot calling, aggressive, and the payoff is really big. Because now the Baron doesn't matter from Sandbox. It doesn't get them enough to actually do anything. And shout out to Alonir in the chat. This is the play G2 would do. And what would G2 do is something I think every team should be looking at in games they lost, even in games they win. Because the soul of what G2 would do, especially mid to late game, is the correct move for where the game is at right now. So, really cool to see. Again, not a mind-blowing thing, especially for the LEC fans that are tuning in for the G2 Origin review that comes in later. But mind-blowing for an LCK fan or an LCK viewer who watched a lot of teams slowly wait out this game. So we can zoom through there, and now the game's once again pretty even. Death's on a Zeal item. The map control that Sandbox has had, if you looked in terms of the wards, they've got more wards down, but they don't really achieve anything, and all easy objectives are gone. All 6 inner and outer turrets are down, so all Sandbox can do is camp for Baron. Ocean Drake spawning at the next time, also not that high a priority resource. So Kingzone used their fresh shops to get 3 items on Sivir, to get Guardian Angel on Kingzone, to get the teamfight Doom comp ready to go, and they didn't have their base broken on a Baron buff that seemed perfectly ready to take them down. And now Sandbox is going to be confused because now their draft, like, this is the moment in the game Kingzone picked for. They picked for the teamfight items with the aggro reset options like a Zonia's and a GA in order to hard engage with Camille and have Sivir fight with their front line. But so many inroads are available for Sandbox with their 3 priority lanes until now, but just like we always talk about, on paper priority hasn't done enough for them. Now at the 27-minute phase, and now it's much more on Sandbox pulling off an outplay or Kingzone just being able to roll through them. Sandbox are just frustrated, right? They don't walk up and contest vision that well. They can't play 3 lanes anymore because actually there's some good turnaround items from the enemy. Syndra now wants to group at every moment. Like, Syndra and Varus are pretty volatile. It's kind of weird. They live like a reverse duck lifestyle, and they start off being like this like vicious fighting duck and then end up being a duckling at the end where they need a lot of tender love and care. Doing the Benjamin Button, I guess. in terms of aging in reverse. Because now Kingzone just control the map. Now it's scary for Sandbox to even contest vision around the Baron spawning in 5 seconds. And if Kingzone are just as decisive as they were in the previous fight, Sandbox know they haven't picked a comp that can beat it. Sandbox trying to push in one wave and then ward, but you notice how shallow their wards have to be compared to the previous time. Jace not pushing very hard. Jace is grouping a minion wave instead of pushing hard, just to hope that there's something that Kingzone have to react to topside, rather than just being able to shove a wave in and take Baron quicker. The ship has sailed on the take Baron quick idea. And actually Kingzone can bait Baron a lot harder because they have Sejuani Taric to tank up the Baron and disregard the damage a lot. Kingzone picking up vision. Sandbox just kind of want to kill Taric. That's the gold standard at a point like this. Like when you're in a game like this where you're like, okay, we can't really deal with the enemy team anymore, so if a team fight's too hard. If you blow up Taric with Chain of Corruption into focus damage before he can ult and force his ult to be used selfishly, if he dies or if his ult is wasted, there actually is hope for Sandbox to turn this around. They see Neon bot side, so that finally allows Sandbox to walk up. But really nice TP ward, you'll notice. Even though there's 4 control wards down, Sandbox actually don't have the safe Baron take thing that they think they do because there's a deep ward for Neon to teleport to. It's incorrect for Neon to be at this map state, i.e. that far down the lane in bot lane, if he has no TP ward to go to. But this TP ward is what allows him to keep up the pressure, and what Kingzone know will encourage Sandbox to keep walking up, because the longer you see a Ryze bot lane split pushing, the more aggressive Sandbox have to posture. Otherwise, Ryze is just taking a free turret, right? So this is all foreseen by Kingzone. So here we go. We knew a team fight would be started. We thought it would be the blue ward, but it ends up just being the river ward that's been pushed down a bit more recently. This is Camille. This is why Camille's solo lane, with the gold income it provides, becoming popular, and why something like Taric or Sona make it work. Because we've seen Camille, Taric, and Camille Sona so far in the LCK. This is your engage range. Like, against how many teams are you at risk at this point as Ghost and OnFlake? Like, there's not many champions that threaten you here in vision. Rascal's in vision and then gets to be Camille and engage 1,000 range instantly and can't die. It's not the flash crescendo that we saw in the Sona Tahm Kench game, but the Taric ult can be used proactively, and with so many comps, you Taric ult like this, i.e. at this timer, the enemy disengages and flashes away. When it's Camille, who has 1,000+ range engage range and has Hextech Ultimatum, you can't engage. So Taric ult will lead to a fight. And that's kind of the magic part of this Taric, Camille, Sejuani comp, is that the Sejuani Camille could do a job in lane 2v2 or 2v1 as it proved to be. And in team fights with enough gold, Sivir makes you fast and Camille does the rest. And guess what? Joker's dead. There's no way out. Whoever they choose is always going to die. And then you're death bowling against 3-item Sivir. It looks competitive, right? Because no one dies super fast. But if Sivir lives the longest, you're going to get kills. Ryze does consistent damage in a team fight, as we know. And it's a 5-for-1 from Kingzone. Here is the next interesting moment. It's 31 minutes into the game. Your Sivir is dead. Won't respawn for 44 seconds. The fastest respawn on the enemy team is 39 seconds. The other Kingzone exclusive call for the LCK is this call on ending the game. So many teams in Korea would be confused as to what to do here. They just take the safe Baron and then back away. Watch what Kingzone does. It's a very extended play. They push through mid lane. They take down the inner turret, feeling like they can take it down. They realize without Sivir, can't end the game, so they move the way towards Baron. So far, they haven't greeded for the inhibitor. If you rush down Inhibitor against this team, against the Tahm Kench with Abyssal Voyage, you will lose the Baron on respawns. So good call from them to take the minimum. They don't end on that push. They turn onto Baron, again without Sivir. So important to note, their Baron speed is fine without being incredible. They get the Baron. Again, good call. So far, calls here are strong, as we mentioned. The team fight we already watched. Joker rolls just to be annoying and in the area. He doesn't have Unsealed Spellbook. I think it's fine to walk up as they do. So now it's Baron buff with Sivir ultimate and the ability to repeat the play. So I think Sandbox are pretty far up, to be honest. In this, where is the safe spot to be against this comp that already took you down? It's hard to know. But we watched this fight in kind of a bit of a slower pace. Watch how they approach this. On a control ward is Cuz, knowing 3 members are there and that any ult is gravy. And Ryze is starting to walk up as the play starts. Realm Warp and Cuz at the same time. Already nice synergies there. And then Taric ult is used to maximize damage output. And then it's just a freebie. This is why you call Sivir Taric a scaling comp. In that if the enemy ever pushes out a base and doesn't have structures to help them, it's over. And that's what it proved to be in this game. And Kingzone's decisiveness, you know, we saw in 3 different plays. The top lane gank into the follow-up in terms of the bot side when they were repelling a Baron, and then they play with the Baron. Yes, they have Camille, Taric, Sejuani, but they paid a heavy price to get those picks. We talked about the lack of priority. And when they got those picks, the biggest, scariest reality of Korea, it's the one I said on day 1 is, I'm worried that Korea will pick champions that work in other regions or champions that beat them in MSI, like, for example, the Pyke, and then just farm to late game with Pyke, never play a chaotic game, and then lose the game. Because actually, the Pyke top lane is not strong unless you play a game plan around it that gets a lot of aggressive skirmishes, 2v2s, 3v3s, 4v4s, 5v5s in the early game to get that mid-game goal generation going with the death from below. And in Korea, the most famous thing we had was we had Camille Jungle being brought over from the LPL, where it was first pick, first ban for a very long time, and people would just never gank as Camille, farm it out, have half a Trinity Force at 25 minutes, and then just lose the game, because guess what? Your Camille doesn't do anything. Certain picks work if you understand them in and out. You need to know how to play with them, against them, and what sort of comps and speed you need to play at to make that work. And that is not something I have a criticism with on Kingzone at all. Kingzone know exactly who Kingzone are, and they know exactly what meta picks work for them and don't. Case in point, the Camille. Cuz was one of the only good Camille jungle players, and Roscoe was one of the best top lane Camille players. Camille Sejuani being in the meta, perfect for them. Exactly a comp they know how to execute, and really well played by them in this game. Neon knows his role, even though he wouldn't have been a starter 2 weeks before the start of summer season. He takes Aftershock, he plays on the weak side, he plays around ganks well, and he plays weak side Ryze, but collapses with TPs and Realm Warps almost on command. And they also, by their time, still make some good proactive moves with fighting before 3 items is done on Sivir. And then the moment 3 items are done on Sivir, they never look like losing because the Taric ult synergy with Camille and just how Taric Camille work. And Camille can always start a fight, but can't be tanky around it, wants to build damage. And Taric gives invulnerability. They put that together. They punch him in the face. A double arm punch, apparently, if you're going to use my gesticulation as an example. So I hope your takeaway from this is that in a week where people have seen the Africa SKT team fight and seen so many Korean teams botch execution and not really know what they are and aren't, it meant a lot to see Kingzone know what they are, know what they aren't, and know how to play around stuff that isn't just cookie cutter. Kingzone DragonX were a really big, a big point of praise from both myself and LS. And here's the part that's slept on. We don't review Kingzone a lot. We don't talk a lot about Kingzone. But the famous result from Kingzone is that from the second round robin onwards, Kingzone went 8-1. They only lost 1 game in their victories, and they lost 2-0 in their loss. So they lost 2-0 to SKT, and then they won 2-1 against Afrika Freaks. They then lost 3-0 to SKT in the semifinals, and people who watch that series know that that was a close-knit loss. The first 2 games could have gone Kingzone's way. Game 3 was a bit more comfortable for Kingzone. So that's 5 losses to SKT, 1 loss to Afrika Freaks. They also are 2-0 and 4-0 in games in summer season. What that tells you is they have dropped 5 games to SKT and 1 game to Afrika since the second round robin, i.e. since end of February 2019. They've dropped 1 game to Afrika and have lost to SKT. No other losses to any other team. That level of consistency has largely gone under the radar because they didn't make a final and because their games don't get as many views. But that is a pretty insane record to only drop 6 games, 5 of which to 1 opponent in the, that's 11 best of 3s and 1 best of 5. They've lost 5 games to SKT and 1 game to Afrika. That's pretty insane in terms of a consistency run. And you know why you guys should care about that? SKT versus Kingzone is this week. I believe it's Friday. Could be Thursday or Friday this week. So if Kingzone beat SKT, because SKT right now is struggling a little bit and Kingzone are on their highest, what does that mean? Does that just mean that Kingzone are the best team in Korea? Like, SKT are the boogeyman for them. They're their bogey team. So if Kingzone can win that game, and right now, for recent play and also the meta, Kingzone seem really sure of themselves, then Kingzone are looking really, really strong. So Kingzone, we should mention, was deft only in the first round robin, and then everyone else around him stepped up, and that consistent run is since the second round robin started. If they are still the team they've been in second round robin till now, then I think Kingzone do make worlds, to the people that are asking. I thought that was off because Neon didn't strike me as being capable enough to replace Pawn, but Neon has looked like he can play the meta champions. His laning phase has been good, and he hasn't made any big Pawn mistakes. And while you don't get the big Pawn solo game wins like some of his LeBlanc plays, if he makes no mistakes and can play adequately, it looks like Kingzone's other 4 players are good enough. So big shout out to Kingzone DragonX. This is my love letter to them in this review. And shout out to Acorn as well. If you guys watched Samsung Blue in 2014, my favorite team of all time, Acorn was the man attributed to being able to play lane swaps and bring new picks like Kale into 1v2s and play the map really well. And he always had kind of new champions, even if his 1v1 laning wasn't always the strongest. Acorn is the drafting coach of Kingzone. So Acorn and Harai have been able to stay with the times impressively. Big shout out to Kingzone. They are a good team. So that'll do it for Kingzone versus Sandbox. Not a explosive game, but I think especially if you've seen all the other clips, you understand why I like to show them as a counterpoint. There is one team who's showing that they've developed a lot in kind of the pit of Korea right now. I'm going to take a short break and final review of the night's an LEC big game. G2 versus Origin. One of my favorite regular season games to watch in a long time. One of the best individual performances I've ever seen from Perks. So going to take a short break, refill up the water bottle. Thanks, Stay Hydrated Bot. And we'll be back with the final review and a couple questions before. Will be LEC action, G2 versus Origin right after this.